Yo, what's good? Me and my girl, we've been doing pretty good, and I'm just trying to see, like, can I try and holler? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, can we live in the same house and stuff? Like, we just chilling, you know what I'm saying? That's all I'm trying to do. We just trying to live together. We ain't married yet, but I just want to live together. You feel me? Have you ever been stuck in a situation like this? You ever wondered, can Christians do that? Well, today, in Youth Pastor Unfiltered, that's what we're going to be learning about. Let's get right to it. So can Christians cohabitate? If y'all don't know what the word cohabitate means, cohabitate is like when people choose to like live together before they're married. It's when they choose to be like, hey, we're going to live in the same apartment, we're going to live in the same house, whatever. Like there's different reasons why people do that. One of the reasons is just because sometimes financially that just makes sense to them. Like maybe they're running through some troubles with money and they're just like, yo, I need a roommate to be able to pay to live in this apartment or to live in this house. Or maybe you've subscribed to what a lot of people say, try before you buy. They say, hey, how can you marry somebody before you actually know what they're like living with them? What if they snore? What if they like poop with the door open? Whatever else people may think. People have all these different ideas of what it looks like. And so sometimes as Christians, we run into that like, is it bad to cohabitate? Well, we're going to go ahead and start off with scripture. So if you go to 1 Corinthians 6:18, it says this. It says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. And so one of the things that you see throughout all of Scripture is that you see this thing called sexual immorality. Now, sexual immorality is an umbrella term that just means anything that's against God's design for sex. See, I've talked about it before, but sex is a great thing. God created sex and he created it for a purpose. But when we do sexual immorality, it's when we say, hey, I don't care what you created sex for, I'm going to do what I want to do. So sexual immorality, best defined as anything that is not a man and a woman who are married. If it is any sexual act outside of a man and a woman who are married, one man, one woman. So I know that like there's a lot of different things out there like polyamory, polygamy, and all that type of stuff. But when you look at what scripture says, it talks about one man and one woman who are married. That is the only way that it is okay. Anything outside of that is sexual immorality. So multiple women, multiple men, like all these different things are against God's design. If you are not married, that's also against God's design. And so that's something that's talked about here, but it's also talked about in other parts of Scripture. In Genesis 2:24, this is after the creation story. This is after it talks about Adam and Eve like being together in the garden and God creating Eve for Adam so that he can be able to have a good companion. And then it goes into this and talks about verse 24, it says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now, if you don't know what the word one flesh means, like the little phrase one flesh, that means when two people have the sex after they're married. So just so you know, then we're clear on what they mean here.
Watch your profanity.
So that's exactly what it's talking about. It's saying that like, hey, like this is why a man leaves his wife. So this is why a man not leaves his wife. Don't want to leave his wife, but this is why a man leaves his father and mother so that he can be united with his wife and be one flesh. It talks about that throughout a lot of scripture. I don't have enough time to show all the verses that talk about this, but sexual immorality is shown throughout all of scripture. So living together, is that okay or is it not? I want you to really think about what living together is. Because see, when you're living together in the same house, there's a lot of things that you can be able to see that you didn't see before. Like when you're not living together, you don't know what they look like when they wake up in the morning. You don't know what they look like when they go to sleep. And so a lot of people will say that the reason why it's really good to cohabitate is because if you cohabitate, you live together, you get to see all of those sides of them before you guys get like a legally binding contract, which is marriage. People will also say that like just because we're living together doesn't mean that we're having sex. We could just be living together and we could just be having a good time living together, cooking breakfast for each other, all that type of stuff, and we could never have sex. And other people will tell you that, hey, like financially, like this makes the most sense, so we're gonna make it work. Now, I'm gonna tell you guys a few problems that I have with this whole thing of cohabitating. The first thing is this. A lot of the reasons why people will cohabitate is because they'll say like stuff like, oh, I want to be able to figure out about my spouse before they become my spouse, because I don't want to legally bind this contract or whatever, and we be together, and then we have to deal with all this stuff. And really, what I would like to kind of narrow that all down to is, I would like to narrow that all down to fear of commitment. There's this fear of commitment, but what people don't recognize is, honestly, you are making a large commitment by even living together. Because here is the problem that you run into. If you guys are both living together and y'all have nothing binding besides this lease or whatever, if both of your names are on this lease, you run into a really awkward moment if y'all break up. Because if y'all break up, who's going to have the house, who's not going to have the house? Are y'all both going to live in the house and just not be together or whatever and just try to avoid each other? Well, then what happens when somebody wants to bring their new date home? Like, does that cause any problems? Does that cause any issues? And so I don't think people recognize that, like, by doing this, they're not actually avoiding commitment. They're just avoiding a legally binding contract as that. But they're not avoiding the commitment of being in a house with one person and having to be able to figure that out together. The second thing is this. Marriage is all about learning about people. And like when you say that you're going to live together, when you say that this is going to be the way that you guys are going to do things, you don't want to be the type of person that just says, hey, I'm going to leave just because it's something that they do that I don't really like. Like, oh, they snore at night and I really can't stand snoring. Or whatever else you may think, because that's not what marriage is like. There's going to be things that you're going to have to deal with. There's going to be adjustments that you're going to have to make. There's going to be things that you guys have to agree on, concessions that you guys have to make. That is what marriage is all about. But when you do with this cohabitating thing, you take out what makes marriage important is that you are going to work things out in a marriage. But when you just cohabitate, you can just leave whenever you feel like it. And it's not any really binding thing. Third thing is, I don't care who you are. I think that if you are cohabitating, you are creating temptation for yourself. If you are trying to live out God's ways and you're trying not to have sex until you're married, and that is really what you're trying to do, then it is probably best not to be living with this person. If you're living with this person, it is going to be very easy for you to fall into that trap. You're going to see her walk behind a towel and you're going to think something. It's a trap! You're going to be hanging out on the couch watching a movie and then your mind is going to go into different places. It's a trap! You're going to see her wake up in the morning and all these different types of things. Like, you're going to see so many different types of things. And you will not have the accountability of being in a public place or being around people where people can be like, oh, okay, well, like, I can't do this in front of all these people. Or even like if you are going over to somebody's house to go on a date versus staying over, when you go over, you just like, hey, I gotta go home eventually, and you have a way out to kind of like choose the better option. But then if y'all are staying in the same house, I mean, best comes to best. I mean, you guys can go to 2 separate rooms, but I mean, it's still like you're a hop, skip, and a jump away from having sex with this person. Like, and that's just the temptation that you don't need to put on yourself. But then my last and final reason why I don't think it's really a good idea for Christians to cohabitate is honestly because it doesn't work. Like, there are so many studies showing that when people cohabitate before they marry, they are a lot more likely to get divorced. Some studies show that they're about 33% more likely to get divorced if you cohabitate before you're married. Now, I know there are going to be some people in the comments that be like, but my dad and my mom, they've been together for forever and they stay together before they're married or whatever else that you guys might see. You guys might know a story of people who cohabitated and are still together. I'm not saying you don't, but that doesn't mean that it's a good idea. When you look at it and you can see the statistics, and majority of the people who do this thing don't actually stay in a marriage, that's a bad sign. Because we are being told that you want to try before you buy, you need to figure out who they are before you get married to them, all these types of things. But obviously that isn't working. And I don't know all the reasons why it doesn't work. I don't understand all the reasons behind it. But one thing I can just think, like maybe from like a theory standpoint of what I think is the reason why. I think the reason why is because when you start it all off that, hey, we're not committed, but we can be able to, if something isn't working or whatever while we're living in the house together, we can break it off. Whether you believe it or not, that same mentality goes into your marriage because you have the same thought like, well, I mean, it's just one paper that we have to sign. It's just one thing that we have to do. It's just one trip to the courthouse. And then you start convincing yourself. So that's what I think. And I think that it's very easy when you are in that mindset to not think of the fact that you are having a lifelong marriage. It's not just something that you just jump into and jump out. It's a commitment that you make. So I'm not sure if you caught me saying it, but I answered the question. The question was, can Christians cohabitate? And I think that it is a terrible idea. I think those 4 reasons that I said are good reasons why you should just not do it. I know that girl looking fine. I know you thinking that this is the best thing for you. Girls, I know you think that guy's going to be doing all this stuff. He's helping you with all these other things, whatever. There's so many different things that you may be thinking. But I just want you to know that it's not the best idea. It just is not. Like, doing this thing, if you are a Christian, I'm not talking about if you're not a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you do whatever you want to do. But all I'm saying is when you look at the studies and you see that it don't really turn out that well, it might not be the best idea. But you know what? You do you, boo-boo. I'm just saying that when you look at like the vast majority of studies, and these aren't just like, oh, studies done by Christian organizations, whatever. Like, these are studies that are done by like people that aren't even Christian or whatever. Like, these are just secular companies that are doing these studies and recognizing that cohabitating doesn't help. And the last thing I want to leave you with is this. Why do you think a guy would want to get married to somebody when he's getting everything that he possibly could from the woman without marrying her? I know that that's something that we don't want to think about, but that's a lot of what happens in this cohabitating things. I know a lot of guys that are living together with these girls and they have no intention of marrying her because they've been around her. They've got to see how she is all the time. And most of them, they are having sex with this woman. And so she's giving them everything that she would give someone that she was married to without the legally binding contract. So then I can just leave whenever I want to leave. I can tell her to get out of my house, or I can just choose to go to a different house and make her have to pay the rent. When you view things in that way, and when you understand how a guy thinks and how he's just going to like get what he wants and then leave, I think it'll help you understand that cohabitating is not a good idea. It's not a good idea for a lot of reasons. I stated some of those reasons, but honestly, there's probably more that I didn't think about. I just think that and I know it's hard, but it's best for you to wait. It's going to be very difficult. There's going to be times where you just want to sleep with them. You just want to see what life is like living with them. You want to see all these things. Don't put yourself through that. Don't let yourself be drawn into that trap, because cohabitation is not a good thing. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help society, and it doesn't help you. And this is why God has these rules. It's not because he doesn't love us. It's because he does love us, and he wants us to enjoy these things. And God has come to give us life, and life more abundantly. And so that is my whole thing. That's what I think about this. What do you guys think? Put it in the comments below. Let me know what you think.